My 7 months pregnant daughter stood at the edge of the narrow mountain trail, begging them to stop. "Please, I'm pregnant." This isn't funny, but her husband's brothers just laughed. "Lighten up, city girl," Kyle said, and then he pushed her. I watched my daughter's body tumble down the rocky embankment, 20 feet of sliding, scraping horror before she grabbed a tree branch. They stood at the top, laughing. "She can climb back up." "Stop being so dramatic," Brandon yelled down to her. Then they turned and walked away, leaving us there as the sun began to set. That's when I pulled out my phone and called my brother Daniel. "They just pushed your 7 months pregnant niece off a mountain trail as a joke," I said. "Do what you do best." But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love to know how far our stories travel. The air that October afternoon in the Rocky Mountains smelled of pine needles and something I couldn't name then but recognize now as danger. To everyone else gathered at the Whitmore family cabin, it probably just smelled like autumn in Colorado, crisp, clean, expensive. The kind of air that rich people pay thousands of dollars to breathe on weekend getaways. But I've always had a nose for trouble. Maybe it comes from 30 years as an ER nurse, where you learn to read the signs before disaster strikes. The subtle change in a patient's breathing, the barely perceptible shift in skin color, the way someone holds their body when they're about to collapse. That's what I felt watching my daughter Julia that entire weekend. She moved carefully, one hand always protectively on her swollen belly, her smile too bright, too strained. 7 months pregnant and trying desperately to prove she could keep up with people who saw her condition as weakness. My name is Catherine Morrison. My friends call me Kate. I'm 61 years old, and I've spent most of my life taking care of people, first in trauma units across Denver, now volunteering at a free clinic 3 days a week. I thought I'd seen every kind of cruelty the human body could inflict and endure. I was wrong. The Whitmore family cabin wasn't really a cabin. It was a 6,000 square foot mountain estate with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Rockies, heated stone floors, a wine cellar, and enough testosterone-fueled machismo to choke a grizzly bear. Everything about it screamed money and power and the kind of casual cruelty that comes from men who've never been told no. Brandon Whitmore, my son-in-law, had married my daughter 2 years ago in an $80,000 wedding that I'd smiled through while my stomach churned. He was 33, a vice president at an investment firm, drove a Tesla, and talked about crushing it and dominating the market, like life was a war he was winning. Julia had been dazzled by him. My sweet, smart daughter, who'd worked her way through college, who'd built a solid career in marketing, had fallen for his polish and his promises. And I'd bitten my tongue, telling myself she was an adult, she'd made her choice. But over 2 years, I'd watched her shrink. The confident young woman who used to debate me, challenge me, laugh with me had slowly disappeared, replaced by someone who apologized constantly, who flinched when Brandon raised his voice, who called me less and less frequently, and now she was 7 months pregnant, her belly round and heavy with his child, still trying to prove she was worthy of being a Whitmore. This weekend was their annual mountain retreat, a tradition where the Whitmore men proved their masculinity through hiking, hunting, and generally being insufferable. This year, they'd graciously decided the wives could come along. Family bonding, Brandon's mother Patricia had called it, with a smile that looked like it hurt. I hadn't wanted to come, but Julia had begged me. "Mom, please, I need you there. It's so intense when it's just me and them. There's so much." Her voice had been small, frightened. "And with the baby, please." So I'd driven 6 hours from Denver and spent 2 days smiling through insults about my quaint volunteer work and my modest lifestyle. Brandon's father, Robert, was dead, killed in a car accident 5 years ago, but his legacy lived on in his 3 sons. Brandon was the middle child, sandwiched between Kyle, 35, corporate lawyer, aggressive, and Eric, 30, private equity, arrogant. All 3 had inherited their father's competitiveness and his complete contempt for anything they perceived as weakness. That Saturday afternoon, they decided on a family hike. "Nothing too crazy," Kyle announced at lunch, grinning. "Just 5 miles up to Eagle Point. Amazing views, character building." Julia's hand had gone immediately to her belly. "I don't know if I should." The doctor said, "Oh, come on." Brandon's voice had that edge I'd come to hate. "You're pregnant, not disabled. My mom did this trail at 8 months. Right, Mom?" Patricia, thin and brittle from too much Pilates and white wine, nodded. "We didn't coddle ourselves back then." "I'll come," Julia said quickly, desperately. It'll be good exercise. That's how we ended up at the trailhead at 3 p.m. 7 people starting a steep mountain hike as the autumn sun began its descent. The trail started easy, a wide path through golden aspens. But within half a mile, it narrowed and steepened, becoming rocky and treacherous. Kyle led at a brutal pace. Eric followed. Brandon walked with his brothers, the 3 of them loud, laughing, their voices echoing off the rocks. Julia and I fell behind immediately. She was breathing hard, one hand on her belly, the other gripping a walking stick Patricia had thrust at her with contempt. "Julia, honey, we can turn back," I said quietly. "The altitude, the baby—" "I'm fine, Mom." But sweat beaded on her face despite the cool air. "I can do this." We'd been hiking 45 minutes when Julia stopped, her hand against a boulder, gasping for breath. "Just need a minute. Jules, come on!" Brandon's voice from ahead, irritated. "She needs rest," I called back. "The altitude. We're all dealing with altitude." Kyle turned back, contemptuous. "What's the problem?" "The problem is she's 7 months pregnant," I snapped. "This trail is too steep." "Too steep?" Eric laughed. "Jesus, it's a hiking trail, not Everest." Julia's face flushed red. Shame, not exertion. "I'm sorry. I can keep going. Can you?" Brandon had hiked back down, and the look on his face made my blood run cold. Not concern, anger. Pure anger at his pregnant wife for embarrassing him. "Because you're holding everyone up." "Brandon, that's not—" I started. "With all due respect, Kate, this is between me and my wife." He looked at Julia. "You knew what you were signing up for. This is a Whitmore tradition. We don't quit." "I'm not quitting." Julia pushed off the boulder, desperate to prove herself. "Let's go." We continued climbing. The trail got steeper, narrower. On our right was the mountain face. On our left, a steep drop-off into rocks and pine trees 30 feet below. Julia was struggling. Each step was an effort. Her breathing came in short gasps. That's when I heard Kyle's voice from ahead, loud and mocking. "Hey, Brandon, your wife's moving slower than my grandmother." "And she's dead!" Laughter. Eric and Brandon both laughed. Julia's face crumpled. She stopped walking, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, I'm trying—" "Hey!" Kyle had walked back to us, Eric right behind him. "What's the holdup? You giving up already?" "She's 7 months pregnant," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "She needs to rest. She needs to toughen up," Eric said. "This is pathetic." They were standing close now, all 3 brothers, looking down at Julia with identical expressions of contempt. My daughter stood there, one hand on her belly, tears on her face, and I saw something shift in their eyes. It started as a joke. At least, that's what they'd claim later. "You know what Jules needs?" Kyle said, grinning at his brothers. "A little motivation. A character-building moment?" Eric agreed, smirking. "Guys, come on," Julia said, backing up slightly. "I'm fine. I'll keep going." "Nah, you need to learn to loosen up," Kyle said. "Stop being so dramatic. Look, there's a little slope here. Why don't you take a shortcut?" He was pointing at the drop-off, the steep embankment that led down to the rocks below. My heart stopped. "Don't you dare!" But Kyle had already moved. He put his hand on Julia's shoulder. "Come on, city girl. Show us what you're made of." "Kyle, no!" Julia's voice was high, panicked. "I'm pregnant. Please don't—" "It's just a little hill," Eric said, moving to her other side. "You can handle it." And then, while I watched in frozen horror, while Brandon stood there doing nothing, his brothers pushed my daughter. Not hard, not violently, just enough to send her stumbling backward toward the edge. "No!" Julia's scream cut through the mountain air. She tried to catch herself, her arms windmilling, but her foot caught on loose rocks. I lunged for her, but I was too far away. She went over the edge. I watched my 7 months pregnant daughter tumble down the rocky embankment, her body hitting rocks and roots, sliding in a cascade of loose gravel and dirt. 20 feet? 25? 30? I was screaming. I don't remember what I screamed, but my voice echoed off the mountains, raw and animal. Then, somehow, miraculously, her hand caught a tree branch, an old pine growing at an angle from the slope. She grabbed it with both hands, her body jerking to a stop with such force I heard her cry of pain from where I stood. She hung there for a terrible moment, suspended by that branch, her pregnant belly exposed, her feet dangling over more empty space. Then she pulled. I watched my daughter, 7 months pregnant, pull herself hand over hand toward a rocky ledge about 6 feet below the branch. It was narrow, maybe 4 feet wide, but it was solid. She collapsed onto it, her whole body shaking. Above me, laughter. I turned to see Kyle and Eric bent over, actually laughing. Laughing so hard they had to wipe tears from their eyes. Did you see her face? Kyle gasped between laughs. Oh my God, the scream! Eric was practically howling. Brandon stood between them, not laughing but smiling. Actually smiling at his pregnant wife's terror. What is wrong with you? I screamed at them. She's pregnant! She could have… Oh, relax, Kyle said, waving his hand dismissively. She's fine. Look, she caught herself. It was a joke, Kate. Learn to take a joke. She's on a ledge. I pointed down at where Julia lay, barely visible through the trees. She can't get back up. Sure she can, Eric said. It's not that steep. She can climb. Stop being so dramatic. Dramatic? I could barely breathe through my rage. You pushed a pregnant woman off a trail. We gave her a little nudge, Kyle corrected. And she's fine. She's sitting right there. You're acting like we murdered her. Brandon. I turned to my son-in-law, desperately hoping to find some shred of humanity. That's your wife. Your pregnant wife. Help her. He looked at me, then down at Julia. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt? Fear? But then it was gone, replaced by the same contempt his brothers wore. You know what? This is ridiculous. Jules can climb back up. It's not that steep. She's just being dramatic like always. He looked at his brothers. Let's keep going. We're losing daylight. What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're leaving? We're not babysitting, Kyle said. She got herself down there. She can get herself back up. It'll be a good learning experience. We're finishing the hike, Brandon said firmly. Mom and I didn't drive 6 hours to turn around because Jules decided to play damsel in distress. Patricia, who'd been standing silently through all of this, nodded. I agree. We shouldn't let theatrics ruin the family tradition. Julia, I yelled down. Are you hurt? Her voice came back small and terrified. Mom, I think something's wrong. The baby, that's when I snapped. I grabbed Brandon's arm, my nails digging in. Your wife just said something's wrong with the baby. You are not leaving, he yanked his arm away. She's always complaining about something. She's fine. You want to stay and coddle her? Fine, but we're going, and they did. Kyle and Eric were already walking away, laughing about dramatic women. Brandon followed them, not looking back. Patricia trailed behind, her spine straight, refusing to acknowledge that anything unusual had happened. Brandon! Julia's voice from below breaking. Brandon, please! Don't leave me! I'm scared. He didn't turn around, didn't even slow down. I watched them disappear around the bend in the trail, their laughter fading until all I could hear was the wind and my daughter's terrified sobs from 30 feet below. For a moment, I just stood there, my brain unable to process what had just happened. They'd pushed her. They'd laughed. They'd left. Then training took over. I ran to the edge and looked down. Julia was on the ledge, curled on her side, her hands on her belly. I could see blood on her temple where her head had hit something on the way down. Julia, honey, look at me. I made my voice calm, professional. Are you hurt? Can you move? She looked up, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Mom, my stomach feels weird. The baby isn't moving. Mom, I'm so scared. Okay, listen to me. I'm coming down. Don't move. Just stay still. I pulled out my phone. 1 bar of signal. Battery at 12%. First call, 911. 911. What's your emergency? My daughter fell down an embankment on the Eagle Point Trail in Rocky Mountain National Park. She's 7 months pregnant. We need mountain rescue immediately. I gave them our GPS coordinates, staying calm, professional. The dispatcher said rescue would take approximately 2 hours. 2 hours. The sun was already dropping toward the horizon. Temperature was maybe 45 degrees now, would drop to below freezing after dark. After confirming they were on their way, I hung up to save battery. Then I made the second call, the number I hadn't dialed in 3 years. Not since our last terrible fight, when I'd told Daniel his obsession with justice was destroying him, and he'd told me I didn't understand what integrity meant. My brother, former FBI agent, the man who'd spent 30 years taking down white-collar criminals, who'd ruined his own career because he refused to let the rich and powerful get away with crimes just because they could afford good lawyers. He answered on the third ring. Yeah? Daniel, it's Kate. Silence. Then, Kate, it's been a while. I know. I'm sorry, my voice cracked. But I need you. They just pushed your pregnant niece off a mountain trail as a joke. Then they laughed and left us here. I heard him sit up, heard the complete shift in his voice. "Tell me everything now." So I did. I told him about the hike, about them pushing Julia, about the laughter, about them walking away while she begged Brandon not to leave her. I told him we were trapped, that she might be hurt, that mountain rescue wouldn't arrive for 2 hours. When I finished, there was a long silence. "I'm in Boulder," he said finally. His voice was cold, controlled. "I can be at the hospital in 90 minutes. And Kate, I'm going to destroy them. All of them." "I know," I said, looking down at my daughter on that ledge. "That's why I called you." After hanging up, I assessed the situation with the clinical detachment I'd learned in emergency rooms. The slope was steep but not vertical, about a 60-degree angle. There were handholds, rocks, roots, small trees. Dangerous but possible. I didn't think about the danger. I thought about my daughter. I sat down at the edge and began descending backward, facing the slope, testing each handhold before trusting my weight to it. The rocks cut my palms. I felt my knee bang against something sharp. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept moving. It took me 7 minutes to reach her. 7 minutes that felt like 7 hours. When I finally dropped onto the ledge beside her, my hands were bleeding and my legs were shaking. "But I was there, Mom," Julia sobbed, throwing herself into my arms. They pushed me. They pushed me, and they laughed, and Brandon just walked away. "I know, baby." I saw it. I saw everything. I held her tight, then pulled back to examine her. "Where are you hurt?" "My head. And my stomach." "Mom, something feels wrong. The baby was moving before, but now I don't feel anything." I placed my hands gently on her belly through her jacket. It felt rigid, contracted. My stomach dropped. "Okay, listen to me carefully. Your uterus is contracting. That might be stress contractions, or it might be preterm labor starting. We need to keep you calm and warm until rescue arrives." "How long?" 2 hours, her face crumpled. 2 hours? "Mom, it's getting dark. It's getting cold, I know, but we're going to be okay, I promise." I pulled off my fleece jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Mountain Rescue knows where we are. They're coming." I looked at her head wound. A gash above her temple, bleeding, but not heavily. I used the sleeve of my shirt to apply pressure. "Mom, why did they do that?" Julia's voice was small, broken. "I'm 7 months pregnant. Why would they push me?" "Because they're cruel," I said simply. "Because they see kindness as weakness and pregnancy as an inconvenience. Because your husband is a monster and you married into a family of monsters." She started crying again. I thought if I just tried harder, if I could prove I wasn't weak, they'd accept me. I thought Brandon loved me. "Oh, sweetheart." I pulled her close, and we sat there on that narrow ledge as the sun painted the sky orange and then gray. "Love doesn't push you off mountains. Love doesn't laugh while you're terrified. Love doesn't walk away." The temperature dropped fast. 45 degrees became 35, then 30. I could see my breath. Julia was shivering despite both our jackets, and then she gasped, her hand flying to her belly. "Mom, that hurt." "Oh God, it really hurt." "Contraction?" "I think so." Another one hit 5 minutes later. Then another 10 minutes after that. I pulled out my phone. 4% battery left. I turned it off to save it for emergencies. We sat there in the growing darkness, my arms around my shivering daughter, feeling her body tense with each contraction. The stars came out, brilliant and cold above us. The temperature kept dropping, and all I could think about was Kyle's hand on her shoulder, Eric's smirk, Brandon's refusal to turn around even when his wife screamed his name. All I could think about was my brother Daniel driving through the mountains right now, already planning how to destroy them. All I could think about was that they'd done this before. They must have. This casual cruelty, this complete lack of consequence, this absolute certainty that they could hurt someone and walk away laughing. This wasn't the first time. "Mom," Julia whispered, "I'm so cold." "I know, baby. Just a little longer. Rescue is coming. If something happens to me, if the baby—" "Nothing is going to happen," I said fiercely. "You're going to be fine. The baby is going to be fine. And when we get off this mountain, your husband is going to learn what happens when you hurt my daughter." She looked up at me, and even in the darkness, I could see the question in her eyes. "What are you going to do?" "Whatever it takes," I said. "Uncle Daniel and I are going to make sure they never hurt anyone again." We sat in silence for a while. Then Julia spoke again, her voice very small. "Do you think he ever loved me?" I thought about lying. But she deserved the truth. No, honey. I don't think he did. I think he loved the idea of having a wife, having a baby, having a perfect family to show off. But I don't think he knows how to love a real person. She nodded against my shoulder. I wasted 2 years. You didn't waste anything. You learned. And now you're going to build a different life. A better one. Another contraction hit. She cried. Out, gripping my hand so hard I felt bones grind together. In the distance, finally, I heard it. The sound of a helicopter. They're coming, I said. Hold on, baby. They're coming. The searchlight cut through the darkness, sweeping across the mountain face until it found us. 2 tiny figures huddled. On a ledge, one of them very pregnant, both of them freezing. The rescue took another 45 minutes. They lowered a paramedic on a cable who secured Julia in a rescue harness and checked her vitals. Then they lifted her up to the helicopter, and then came back for me. As I rose into the air, I looked down at the trail where we'd been. In the darkness, I couldn't see anything, but I knew that 5 miles away, in a warm cabin with a roaring fire, Brandon Whitmore and his brothers were probably drinking whiskey and laughing about the dramatic women they'd left on the mountain. They had no idea what was coming for them. They had no idea that pushing my daughter off that trail was the worst mistake they'd ever made. Inside the helicopter, a paramedic was checking Julia's vitals. Blood pressure elevated. Contractions every 8 minutes. We need to get her to Boulder Medical Center immediately. Is the baby okay? Julia asked, her voice weak. The paramedic placed a fetal monitor on her belly. After a moment, I heard it. The fast, strong heartbeat of my grandchild. Baby's heart rate is good, he said. You're going to be okay. Julia started crying again, but this time from relief. I held her hand as the helicopter raced toward Boulder, the mountains black and massive below us. My phone was dead. My body ached. My hands were torn and bloody from the climb. But I'd saved my daughter. Now came the hard part. Now came the reckoning. The emergency room at Boulder Medical Center was a blur of bright lights, urgent voices, and the antiseptic smell that had been my second home for 30 years. But this time, I wasn't wearing scrubs. I was a patient's mother, standing helplessly while doctors and nurses swarmed around my daughter. She's 31 weeks pregnant, fell approximately 30 feet down a rocky embankment, the paramedic was saying. Contractions every 7 minutes. Mild hypothermia, possible placental abruption. Get her into trauma too, a doctor ordered. I want fetal monitoring, ultrasound, and someone call OB/GYN now. They wheeled Julia away, and I tried to follow, but a nurse gently stopped me. Ma'am, you need to be checked too. You're bleeding. I looked down at my hands. The palms were torn open from the rocks, still oozing blood. My jeans were ripped at the knees, showing scraped raw skin underneath. I hadn't even felt it. I'm fine. I need to be with my daughter. They're taking good care of her. Let us take care of you. The nurse was young, firm, kind. She reminded me of myself 30 years ago. Come on. Treatment room 3. I let her lead me to a small room where she cleaned and bandaged my hands with efficient, gentle movements. My mind was racing, replaying the moment over and over. Kyle's hand on Julia's shoulder. The push, her scream, the laughter. Your daughter's lucky you were there, the nurse said, applying antibiotic ointment. Climbing down that embankment yourself, that was incredibly brave. It wasn't brave, I said flatly. It was necessary. They pushed her and left her there, the nurse's hands stilled. I'm sorry, what? Her husband's brothers. They pushed her off the trail as a joke. Then they walked away laughing while she was on a ledge, bleeding, pregnant, terrified. The nurse's face hardened. Did you report this to the police? Not yet, but I will. She finished bandaging my hands in silence, then said quietly, There's a police officer in the waiting room. He came with the mountain rescue team. You should talk to him. After she left, I sat alone in that small room, my bandaged hands in my lap, and let myself feel it. All the rage I'd been suppressing to stay calm for Julia came flooding through me like acid. My whole body shook with it. They'd pushed my pregnant daughter off a mountain trail. They'd laughed while she screamed. They'd walked away. And Brandon, her husband, the father of her child, had turned his back while she begged him not to leave her. The door opened. A tall man in his 60s walked in, his face weathered and familiar. My brother Daniel, Kate. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled me into a hug. I felt something crack inside me, and suddenly I was crying, my face pressed against his shoulder. They pushed her, Daniel. I watched them push her. I know. You told me on the phone. His voice was cold, controlled. And they're going to pay for it. All of them. He pulled back and looked at my face. Is she okay? The baby? I don't know. They're with her now. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to talk to the police officer waiting outside. You're going to tell him exactly what you saw, every detail, every word they said. I've already made some calls. What kind of calls? The kind I'm good at. His smile was grim. I still have friends in the FBI, friends who remember me before I became inconvenient. And I started digging the second you called. Kate, this isn't the first time. My blood ran cold. What do you mean? 15 years ago, Brandon Whitmore was a freshman at Stanford. His roommate was a kid named Marcus Chen, smart kid, computer science major, from a working-class family in San Francisco. Brandon and Marcus started a tech company together in their dorm room. Just a small app, but it had potential. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed me a scanned newspaper article. The summer after their sophomore year, they went on a hiking trip. Same place, Rocky Mountain National Park. Marcus fell off a trail, broke his neck, died instantly. I stared at the photo. A young Asian man with glasses and a shy smile. Someone's son. The investigation concluded it was an accident, Daniel continued. Marcus was inexperienced, lost his footing, tragic but not suspicious. The case was closed in 3 weeks. But you don't think it was an accident? I know it wasn't. Because 6 months after Marcus died, Brandon filed papers dissolving their company and creating a new one, taking all of Marcus's code, all his intellectual property. He sold it 2 years later for $2.3 million. That's how he got the seed money for his investment career. The room felt too small, too hot. You're saying Brandon killed his roommate for a startup? I'm saying Marcus Chen fell off a hiking trail after having an argument with Brandon about company ownership. I'm saying there was one witness, Brandon's brother Kyle, who was there on the trip. I'm saying the detective who handled the case retired 6 months later and bought a house in Aspen that cost $800,000. Daniel's eyes were hard. And I'm saying that 15 years later, Brandon Whitmore's brothers pushed his pregnant wife off a trail and laughed about it. Jesus Christ. Marcus's mother still lives in San Francisco. She never believed it was an accident. She tried to push for a deeper investigation, but she was a Chinese immigrant with limited English, no money, no connections. The Whitmores buried her in legal threats until she gave up. He put his phone away. I called her 3 hours ago, told her what happened to Julia, told her I was reopening her son's case. Kate, she started crying. She said she'd been waiting 15 years for someone to believe her. I felt sick. Julia had been married to a murderer. She was carrying a murderer's child. What do we do? First, you talk to the police. Give your statement. Then I start pulling threads. The Whitmores think they're untouchable because they have money and lawyers. They don't know that I spent 30 years taking down people exactly like them. They don't know that I don't care about my career anymore because they already destroyed it. I have nothing to lose, Kate. And that makes me very dangerous. Before I could respond, a doctor in scrubs appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Morrison? You can see your daughter now. Julia lay in a hospital bed surrounded by monitors. Her face was pale, her hair matted with sweat and dirt. But she was awake. An IV ran into her arm and monitor leads disappeared under her hospital gown. Mom. Her voice was weak, but she was smiling. The baby's okay. They did an ultrasound. The baby's heart is strong. I took her hand carefully, mindful of my bandages. Thank God. They're keeping me for observation. Possible preterm labor, they said. I have to stay on bed rest, but her voice broke. The baby's okay. That's all that matters. Mrs. Sullivan? A different doctor entered. An older woman with kind eyes and gray hair. I'm Dr. Patel, obstetrics. Your daughter was very lucky. She's experiencing stress contractions, but not true labor. However, given the trauma and the risk of placental complications, we're going to keep her here for at least 48 hours. Complete bed rest, monitoring. If everything stays stable, she can go home with strict activity restrictions. Whatever she needs, I said. Dr. Patel looked at Julia with concern. The nurse mentioned that you fell during a hike. Can you tell me what happened? Julia's face crumpled. They pushed me. My husband's brothers pushed me off the trail. I'm 7 months pregnant, and they pushed me as a joke. Dr. Patel's expression hardened. I see. Mrs. Sullivan, I need to document this for your medical record. I'm also required to report this to the police as it may constitute assault. Good, I said. Report it. I want everyone to know what they did. After the doctor left, Julia looked at me with frightened eyes. Mom, what's going to happen? Brandon, he's going to be so angry. He'll say I'm overreacting, that it was just his brothers being stupid, that I'm causing drama. Julia, I squeezed her hand. Brandon isn't angry. Do you know why? Because Brandon hasn't called. He hasn't texted. He hasn't come to the hospital. He pushed you off a trail and then went back to the cabin to drink with his brothers. He doesn't care if you're okay. He doesn't care if his baby is okay. Tears streamed down her face. I know that now. I've known it for a long time, but I kept telling myself I was wrong, that I was being too sensitive. You weren't wrong. You were married to a monster, and you did what you had to do to survive. But that's over now. You're safe. The baby's safe. And they're never going to hurt you again. How can you be sure? Daniel stepped forward from where he'd been standing quietly by the door. Because I'm going to make sure of it. Hi, Jules. Long time. Julia's eyes widened. Uncle Daniel? Oh my God, what are you doing here? Your mom called me. And I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to destroy the people who hurt you. The police officer who took my statement was a young man named Officer Ryan Torres. He listened carefully as I described everything. The hike, Julia's struggle to keep up, the brothers mocking, the push, the laughter, them walking away. And you're certain it was intentional? He asked. They deliberately pushed her? Kyle Whitmore put his hand on her shoulder and shoved her backward toward the embankment. She tried to resist. She said, "Please don't, I'm pregnant." He pushed her anyway. Eric Whitmore was laughing. Brandon Whitmore, her husband, stood there and did nothing. And then they left. They walked away laughing, called her dramatic, said she could climb back up on her own. They knew she was pregnant. They knew she was injured. They left her on a ledge in dropping temperatures with night coming. Officer Torres wrote it all down. Mrs. Morrison, this is a serious accusation. Assault, reckless endangerment, possibly attempted manslaughter given your daughter's pregnancy. Are you prepared to press charges? Absolutely. And your daughter? Ask her yourself. But yes, she'll press charges. He nodded. Okay. I'm going to need to speak with her, and then I'll be heading up to the Whitmore cabin to get their side of the story. Ma'am, I have to warn you, people like the Whitmores, they have expensive lawyers. This is going to be complicated. Let it be complicated, I said. They pushed a pregnant woman off a mountain and left her to die. I don't care how expensive their lawyers are. After he left, Daniel sat down beside me in the waiting room. Good. Now we have an official police report. That's step 1. What's step 2? I called an old friend, Diane Wu. She used to work with me at the FBI. Now she's a prosecutor in Boulder County. She remembers Marcus Chen's case. She was a junior prosecutor back then, and she always thought something was wrong with how quickly it was closed. Can she reopen it? With new evidence, yes. And Kate today gave us new evidence. Pattern of behavior. The Whitmores have a history of putting people in dangerous situations on mountain trails and walking away. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. My phone buzzed. I'd gotten it charged at the nurse's station. A text from an unknown number. This is Brandon. Where is Julia? Why isn't she answering her phone? I stared at it in disbelief. 6 hours. It had been 6 hours since he'd walked away from his wife on that mountain, and he was just now asking where she was. I showed Daniel. His jaw clenched. Don't answer. Let him sweat. But my phone rang immediately. Brandon's number. Answer it, Daniel said. Put it on speaker. I want to hear this, I answered. Yes? Kate, where the hell is Julia? Her phone is going to voicemail, and she's not back at the cabin. Did she go home early or something? I took a breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Julia is at Boulder Medical Center. She's in the hospital. Silence. Then, what? Why? What happened? What happened is that your brothers pushed her off a trail. She fell 30 feet. She hit her head. She could have died, Brandon. Your baby could have died. Wait, what? They were just joking around. It was supposed to be funny. Funny? My voice rose despite my efforts to stay controlled. You think pushing a 7 months pregnant woman off a trail is funny? It wasn't a big deal, Kate. She was being dramatic. Kyle barely touched her. I was there, Brandon. I watched him push her. I watched you all laugh. I watched you walk away while your wife was bleeding on a ledge, crying for help. She's fine though, right? I mean, you said she's at the hospital, so she's being taken care of. She's being taken care of now. After Mountain Rescue spent 2 hours getting to us. After we sat in freezing temperatures while she had contractions. After I climbed down 30 feet of rocks to reach her because her husband left her there. Okay, look, I can explain. You can explain it to the police. They're on their way to the cabin now. I've filed a report for assault and reckless endangerment. His voice changed completely. Gone was the casual dismissiveness. Now he was angry. You did what? Kate, you can't be serious. This is a family matter. This is an assault matter. Your brothers assaulted your pregnant wife. You witnessed it and did nothing. You all left the scene. That's a crime, Brandon. Jesus Christ, you're going to ruin everything over a stupid accident. It wasn't an accident. They pushed her on purpose. And I'm done pretending this family hasn't been abusive to my daughter for 2 years. I'm done watching her shrink and apologize and try to be good enough for people who will never respect her. You're making a huge mistake, he said, his voice cold now. My family has lawyers. We'll bury you in legal fees. Bring your lawyers. We'll see you in court. I hung up. My hands were shaking. Daniel put his arm around my shoulders. Good, he said. Let him panic. Panic makes people sloppy. And Kate? That conversation you just had? I recorded it. His admission that Kyle pushed her, his dismissal of the severity, his threats. All evidence. 2 hours later, Officer Torres called me back. Mrs. Morrison, I went to the Whitmore cabin. All 3 brothers were there, along with Patricia Whitmore. They confirmed they were on a hike with Julia today. However, their story differs significantly from yours. Of course it does. What did they say? They claim Julia lost her balance and fell on her own. They say they didn't push her, and they immediately called for help before heading back to contact authorities. They say you're making false accusations because you've never liked Brandon and you're trying to break up their marriage. I closed my eyes. That's a lie. All of it. I believe you, ma'am, but here's the problem. It's your word against theirs. 4 of them, 2 of you. Without additional evidence or witnesses, this becomes very difficult to prosecute. What about Julia's statement? She can testify, absolutely. But they'll argue she was in shock, confused, biased against her husband. Mrs. Morrison, I'm not saying we can't build a case. I'm saying it's going to be an uphill battle. After I hung up, I felt despair creeping in. They were going to get away with it. Money and lawyers and lies. They were going to walk away clean. Then Daniel looked up from his laptop, a slow smile spreading across his face. Kate, what was the name of that trail again? Eagle Point Trail. Why? Because I just found something interesting. 6 weeks ago, the National Park Service installed new trail cameras along Eagle Point, wildlife monitoring. They're motion activated. My heart started pounding. I think we might have video evidence. He was already dialing his phone. I have a friend at the Park Service. If those cameras caught what happened. He paused as someone answered. Hey, Mike, it's Daniel Morrison. I need a favor. A big one. That night, I slept in a chair in Julia's hospital room. She was on fetal monitors, the steady beep of the baby's heartbeat, a reassuring rhythm in the darkness. Around midnight, she woke up. Mom, are you awake? Yeah, honey. What's wrong? I was thinking about what you said. About Brandon never loving me. She was quiet for a moment. I think you're right. I think he saw me as an acquisition. Like a nice car or a good investment. Something to show off. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Don't be. I'm the one who should apologize. You tried to warn me, and I didn't listen. I thought you were being overprotective. I thought I knew better. You were in love. Or you thought you were. It's not your fault. What happens now? With the baby? We'll figure it out. But Julia, you need to understand something. That baby is part you and part him. But the baby didn't push you off that trail. The baby didn't laugh while you were terrified. The baby is innocent. And when you look at your child, I need you to see your child, not Brandon. I will. I promise, she paused. Will Uncle Daniel really be able to stop them? If anyone can, it's Daniel. He spent 30 years bringing down people like the Whitmores. He knows how they think, how they operate, how they hide their crimes. They won't just let this go. No, they won't. They're going to fight. They're going to lie and threaten and try to make you look crazy. But we have something they don't. What? The truth. And your uncle is very, very good at making the truth impossible to ignore. The next morning brought news. Daniel burst into the room at 7 a.m. with coffee and a tablet. We got it, he said, his eyes bright. The trail cam footage. Mike from Park Service sent it over. It's grainy, but it's there. He pulled up the video on his tablet. Black and white, time-stamped, slightly blurry, but unmistakable. There was Julia standing on the trail. There was Kyle approaching her, putting his hand on her shoulder. There she was, backing up, shaking her head. There was the push, clear as day, his hands on her shoulders, shoving her toward the edge. There she was, falling, and this was the part that made me feel sick. There they were, Kyle, Eric, and Brandon, standing at the edge, looking down. The video had no sound, but you could see their body language. Kyle bent over, his shoulders shaking with laughter. Eric slapping his knee. Brandon standing with his arms crossed, a small smile on his face. Then, all three turned and walked away. The timestamp showed they stood there for exactly 42 seconds before leaving. "Oh my God," Julia whispered, staring at the screen. "They really did just leave me." "This changes everything," Daniel said. "This is video evidence of assault, of abandonment. They can't lie their way out of this. What do we do with it? First it goes to the police, then to the prosecutor. And then," Daniel smiled, "then it goes everywhere. Because Kate, I have a friend at Channel 7 News, and I think Denver would be very interested in seeing what one of their prominent investment bankers does to his pregnant wife for fun." Julia looked at me, then at Daniel. "Do it. Show everyone. I don't care anymore about protecting his reputation. He didn't care about protecting me." Officer Torres arrived an hour later. Daniel showed him the video. I watched the officer's face harden as he viewed it 3 times. "That's clear assault," he said finally. "And given that they left her there injured, we can add reckless endangerment and possibly attempted manslaughter. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm going to arrest all 3 brothers today." "What about Patricia?" I asked. "She was there. She walked away too. We'll investigate her involvement. But right now the video shows the brothers as the primary perpetrators." After he left, Julia started crying. Not sad tears, something else. Relief maybe, or grief for the life she'd thought she had. "It's really over, isn't it?" she said. "My marriage, my life with Brandon, everything." "That life was killing you," I said gently. "What's over is the pretending. What's over is making yourself small to fit into their world. What's starting is your real life. You and your baby in a future where you don't have to apologize for existing." "I'm scared. I know. But you're not alone. You have me. You have Daniel. And you have yourself. And honey, you're stronger than you know. You survived 2 years with the Whitmores. You survived them pushing you off a mountain. You can survive anything." That afternoon, Channel 7 News broke the story. Prominent Denver investment banker arrested for assault of pregnant wife. The trail cam footage, grainy but damning, played on loop. Within hours, it had gone viral. Social media exploded. Brandon's investment firm issued a statement. Brandon Whitmore has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending the outcome of the legal proceedings. By evening, Daniel had more news. Marcus Chen's mother watched the news coverage. She called Diane Wu the prosecutor. She's willing to testify about what happened 15 years ago, about the similarities, about how the investigation was shut down. Will that be admissible? Diane thinks so. It establishes a pattern of behavior. The Whitmores putting people in danger on mountain trails. And Kate, there's more. He pulled up something on his laptop. "I've been digging into Robert Whitmore, Brandon's father. The one who died in a car accident 5 years ago." "What about him?" "He died on a mountain road. Single car accident. Drove off a cliff. The investigation concluded he fell asleep at the wheel." Daniel looked at me. "But Robert had just changed his will 2 weeks before he died. The old will split everything equally between his 3 sons and his wife. The new will left almost everything to Patricia, with the sons getting trust funds they couldn't touch until age 40. I think the Whitmore family has a pattern of convenient accidents on mountains. I think we're looking at a family that's been getting away with murder for decades. And I think Julia stumbled into something much darker than an abusive marriage." I felt cold. "Daniel, if you're right, if they've killed before, Julia's in danger. The baby's in danger. Once Brandon realizes we're not backing down, already handled. There's a police officer stationed outside her room. And when she's released, she's not going home to that house. She's staying with you, and I've arranged for private security. How are you paying for all this?" He smiled grimly. Marcus Chen's mother isn't poor anymore. Her son's code, the code Brandon stole, was the basis for a security app that eventually sold for $50 million. She got nothing from it, but she invested her son's life insurance wisely. She's funding this investigation. She wants justice for Marcus, and she wants to make sure the Whitmores never hurt anyone again. 3 days later, Julia was released from the hospital. The baby was stable, the contractions had stopped, but she was on strict bed rest for the remainder of her pregnancy. I brought her to my house, a small 3-bedroom in a quiet Denver suburb. Nothing fancy, but it was warm and safe and filled with love. She stood in the guest room, now her room, and looked around at the books I'd arranged. The soft blankets, the window that looked out on my garden. "I don't have anything," she said quietly. "All my clothes, my things, they're all at Brandon's house. We'll get you new things. Better things. Things that are just yours. Mom, what if he fights for custody? What if he tries to take the baby? Then we fight back. Honey, he pushed you off a mountain. A judge is going to see that video. No court is going to give custody to a man who assaulted his pregnant wife." That evening, Daniel came over with his laptop. "You both need to see this. It's been a long day of digging, but I found something." He opened a folder of documents. 5 years ago, when Robert Whitmore died, there was a witness. A truck driver on the mountain road saw the whole thing. He gave a statement to police saying he saw Robert's car swerve deliberately, like someone was fighting for the wheel. But that statement disappeared from the official file. Disappeared? I found the truck driver. His name is Tom Brewster. He still lives in Colorado Springs. I called him today. He says 2 men in expensive suits came to his house 3 days after he gave his statement. They offered him $50,000 in cash to misremember what he saw. When he refused, they showed him photos of his grandchildren and suggested it would be terrible if something happened to them. Julia gasped. They threatened his family? So he changed his statement, said he must have been mistaken, that Robert probably just fell asleep. Case closed. Daniel looked at us. But Tom kept the original statement, and he's willing to testify now. He says he's felt guilty for 5 years, and watching what they did to Julia made him realize he can't stay quiet anymore. So we can prove they killed their own father? I said, we can prove there's reasonable suspicion to reopen the case. Combined with Marcus Chen's death 15 years ago and Julia's assault this week, we have a pattern. The Whitmores eliminate obstacles. Marcus was an obstacle to Brandon's fortune. Robert was an obstacle to Patricia's control of the family wealth. And Julia? He looked at my daughter. Julia, you were becoming an obstacle. You were asking questions about money. You were standing up for yourself more. You were pregnant, which meant you'd have leverage. They needed to remind you of your place, or get rid of me, Julia whispered. I don't think Brandon planned to kill you, Daniel said carefully. But I think his brothers did it to show him they could, to prove you were disposable. And Brandon's response, walking away, laughing, that was his agreement. That was him saying, yes, she's disposable. Silence filled my small living room. Outside, the autumn evening was darkening, but inside, we sat in the warm light of truth. Terrible truth, but truth nonetheless. What happens now? Julia asked. Now we finish this, Daniel said. The prosecutor has enough for multiple charges against all 3 brothers. The Marcus Chen case is being officially reopened. The Robert Whitmore case is under review. And Julia, you're going to testify. You're going to look those men in the eye and tell everyone what they did to you. I'm scared. You should be. They're dangerous, but they're also cornered, and cornered animals make mistakes. They're already making them. Brandon's lawyers are issuing threats, which makes them look guilty. Patricia is giving interviews calling you mentally unstable, which makes her look cruel. Kyle tried to intimidate a witness and got arrested for it. They're falling apart. I took my daughter's hand. We're going to get through this. Together, she squeezed back. Together. 8 weeks after they pushed her off that mountain, Julia went into labor. It was 3 a.m. when she shook me awake, her voice tight with pain. Mom, it's time. The drive to the hospital was surreal, the same hospital where Mountain Rescue had brought us, where we'd learned the baby had survived, where Julia had made the decision to press charges and divorce Brandon. But this time was different. This time we weren't running from danger. We were running toward life. Julia's labor was long, 14 hours of contractions, of breathing through pain, of me holding her hand and telling her she was strong, she could do this. She was almost there. At 5:47 p.m. on a cold November evening, my granddaughter was born. 6 pounds, 2 ounces, perfect, healthy, alive. She's beautiful, Julia sobbed, holding her daughter for the first time. Mom, look at her. She's perfect. I looked at this tiny person, this child who'd survived a fall down a mountain, who'd stayed strong in her mother's womb while Julia fought for both their lives. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. What are you going to name her? I asked. Julia looked down at her daughter's face, then up at me. Hope? Her name is Hope Catherine. Hope, because that's what she gave me when I thought I had nothing left. Catherine after you. I started crying then. Not from sadness or fear or rage, but from pure love. Brandon tried to come to the hospital. Security stopped him at the entrance. The restraining order Julia had filed 3 weeks earlier was still in effect. He wasn't allowed within 500 feet of her. But he stood in the parking lot, visible from Julia's window, holding flowers and looking up like some kind of romantic hero instead of the man who'd laughed while his wife fell off a mountain. He thinks he can fix this, Julia said, looking down at him. He thinks if he just performs the right gestures, everything will go back to normal. Do you want me to have security move him? No, let him stand there. Let him see what he lost. The trial began 2 weeks later. Julia couldn't attend. She was home with Hope. Still recovering, but I sat in that courtroom every single day, watching as the evidence mounted against the Whitmore brothers. The prosecutor, Diane Wu, was brilliant. She started with the trail cam footage, playing it for the jury on a large screen. The courtroom went silent as they watched Kyle push Julia, watched all 3 brothers laugh, watched them walk away. Ladies and gentlemen, Diane said, her voice clear and strong, what you just saw is not a joke gone wrong. It's not horseplay. It's assault. These 3 men deliberately pushed a 7 months pregnant woman off a steep trail, laughed while she screamed for help, and abandoned her in dropping temperatures with night approaching. If not for her mother's quick action and the skill of mountain rescue, both Julia Sullivan and her unborn child would have died. Brandon's lawyer tried to argue it was an accident, that Kyle had merely tapped Julia's shoulder and she'd overreacted and lost her balance. Then, Diane played Kyle's own words, recorded by police during his initial interview. I pushed her as a joke. I didn't think she'd actually fall. It was supposed to be funny. The jury's faces said everything. This wasn't funny. This was cruel. But Diane didn't stop there. She brought in Marcus Chen's mother, a small, dignified woman in her 70s who testified about her son's death 15 years ago. My son called me the week before he died, she said, her English accented but clear. He told me Brandon Whitmore was trying to force him out of their company. He said Brandon threatened him. 3 days later, my son fell off a mountain during a hiking trip with Brandon. The police said it was an accident. I knew it wasn't. A mother knows. The defense objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed it. Pattern of behavior is relevant in establishing intent, she ruled. Then came Tom Brewster, the truck driver who'd witnessed Robert Whitmore's death. His testimony was damning. I saw someone in the passenger seat fighting with the driver. The car swerved like there was a struggle for the wheel. Then it went over the cliff. He looked directly at the jury. 2 days later, men came to my house. They showed me pictures of my grandchildren. They said it would be a shame if something happened to them. So I changed my story. I've regretted it every day since. The courtroom erupted. The judge had to call for order. Patricia Whitmore sat in the gallery, her face frozen in a mask of rage. She'd avoided charges herself. There was no evidence she'd known about Robert's murder or participated in it, but her reputation was destroyed. The Denver society that had once courted her now whispered behind her back. Daniel testified about his investigation, about the patterns he'd found, about the web of cover-ups and bribes and threats. And finally, via video link so she didn't have to leave Hope, Julia testified. She told the jury about 2 years of verbal abuse, of being told she was too sensitive, too dramatic, too weak. She told them about the hike, about struggling to keep up, about begging them to stop. Kyle put his hands on my shoulders, she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. I said, please don't, I'm pregnant. He smiled at me and said, lighten up, city girl. Then he pushed me. I fell backward. I remember hitting rocks, sliding, trying to grab onto anything. When I finally stopped on that ledge, I looked up and they were all standing there laughing. My husband was laughing while I bled and cried for help. The jury watched her on the screen, this young mother with a newborn baby, telling her story with quiet dignity. Did your husband come down to help you? Diane asked. No, he turned around and walked away. All 3 of them did. They left me there to die. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the judge had to pause to compose herself. The defense tried to paint Julia as vindictive, as an angry ex-wife seeking revenge. But the video footage made their arguments hollow. You couldn't fake that push. You couldn't fake that laughter. You couldn't fake them walking away. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. Kyle Whitmore, guilty of assault in the 2nd degree. Guilty of reckless endangerment. Sentenced to 8 years in prison. Eric Whitmore, guilty of assault in the 2nd degree. Guilty of reckless endangerment. Sentenced to 7 years in prison. Brandon Whitmore, guilty of reckless endangerment. Guilty of criminal negligence. Sentenced to 5 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 3. The courtroom erupted again. Patricia Whitmore screamed that it was a miscarriage of justice, that her sons were innocent, that we'd all pay for this. But as the bailiffs led the 3 brothers away in handcuffs, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. 6 months later, I sat in my backyard watching Julia play with Hope on a blanket in the grass. It was May, and the garden was blooming, roses and lavender and the wildflowers I'd planted specifically because Julia had always loved them. Hope was 4 months old now, a happy baby with Julia's eyes and, thankfully, none of Brandon's cruelty in her smile. She grabbed at dandelions with chubby fists and laughed at everything. "She's going to be okay," Daniel said, sitting down beside me with 2 glasses of iced tea. "Julia, I mean. She's stronger than she was." "She is," I agreed. "But it took almost dying to find that strength. I wish she hadn't had to go through all of that. Sometimes that's how strength works. It's forged in fire." The Marcus Chen case had been officially reopened. New evidence, including testimony from other Stanford students who'd heard Brandon threaten Marcus, had led to a grand jury indictment. Brandon was facing murder charges on top of his existing sentence. The Robert Whitmore case was also under active investigation. Patricia had hired a team of lawyers, but the evidence was mounting against her. She might not have pushed the car over the cliff, but she'd certainly benefited from it and covered it up. "What will happen to Hope?" Daniel asked. "When Brandon gets out of prison eventually?" Julia's already filed to terminate his parental rights. Given that he was convicted of crimes committed while Julia was pregnant, crimes that endangered Hope's life, the judge is likely to grant it, and if he fights it, then we fight back. But honestly, I don't think he will. Brandon's already trying to distance himself from his family. His lawyers are crafting a narrative where he was the good one, led astray by his violent brothers. He won't want custody of a child that ties him to this scandal. Julia walked over, Hope in her arms. "Mom, Daniel, come see." Hope just rolled over for the first time. We spent the afternoon in the sunshine, 3 generations of women, and Daniel, the honorary uncle, celebrating tiny milestones. Hope's first roll, her gurgling laugh, the way she gripped her mother's finger with surprising strength. As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and gold, Julia sat beside me on the porch swing. Hope sleeping against her shoulder. "Mom, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I'm scared." She looked at me with those serious eyes. "Not of Brandon or his family anymore. I'm scared of being a good mother. What if I mess her up? What if I'm not strong enough?" I took her hand. "Julia, you survived 2 years in an abusive marriage. You survived being pushed off a mountain while 7 months pregnant. You testified against your abusers in open court. You're raising a beautiful daughter on your own. You are strong enough. You always were. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. But you didn't have to. That's what family means. Not the family you were born into or the one you married into. Those can be toxic. Real family is the people who climb down mountains for you, who stand beside you in courtrooms, who hold your hand when you're terrified. That's us, sweetheart. You, me, Daniel, and now Hope." She leaned her head on my shoulder. And we sat there as the stars came out, 4 people who'd been through hell and come out the other side, scarred but whole. 1 year after that terrible day on the mountain, Julia and I returned to Eagle Point Trail. Not to hike it. Neither of us wanted to relive that trauma, but to stand at the trailhead and acknowledge what had happened there. Hope was with us, strapped to Julia's chest in a carrier, awake and curious about the mountains. "This is where it happened," Julia said quietly, looking up at the trail. "This is where I almost died. But you didn't die. You survived. Because of you. Because of you. You held onto that branch. You pulled yourself to safety. You protected Hope even when you were terrified. I just helped. Julia took a deep breath of the pine-scented air. I'm not afraid anymore, Mom. Not of Brandon, not of his family, not of being alone. I'm not afraid. We stood there for a while longer, then turned and walked back to the car. Behind us, the mountain stood indifferent and eternal, holding its secrets, but we were no longer among them. We had survived and we were free. As we drove home, Hope babbling happily in her car seat, Julia said something I'll never forget. You know what the worst part was? Not the fall, not the pain, not even thinking I might die. The worst part was believing I deserved it. Believing that if I'd just been stronger, faster, better, they wouldn't have pushed me. And now? Now I know the truth. I didn't deserve it. No one deserves to be pushed off a mountain. And the people who did it, who laughed about it, who walked away, they're the ones who were broken, not me. Hope reached forward and grabbed her mother's hair, pulling with surprising strength. Julia laughed and gently untangled the tiny fist. Easy there, little one. Mama needs that. In my rearview mirror, I watched them. My daughter and my granddaughter, both miracles, both survivors. Julia was singing softly now, some lullaby I'd sung to her when she was small. The sun was setting behind us as we drove home, leaving the mountains behind. Not forgotten, but no longer powerful. We'd been pushed off a cliff, literally and metaphorically. But we'd grabbed hold of branches. We'd pulled ourselves to safety. We'd waited for rescue and then rescued ourselves. And now, driving through the golden light of early evening with my daughter singing to her child, I realized something important. We hadn't just survived. We'd won, not because Brandon and his brothers were in prison, though that helped. Not because their empire had crumbled, though watching it fall had been satisfying. We'd won because we were still here, still whole, still capable of love and laughter and hope. They'd tried to break us. They'd tried to make Julia believe she was weak, worthless, disposable. They'd failed, and in their failure, they'd proven something my daughter had forgotten during those 2 terrible years, that she was stronger than anyone, including herself, had ever believed. As we pulled into my driveway, Hope fell asleep, her tiny hand wrapped around Julia's finger. My daughter looked down at her child with such fierce, protective love that it took my breath away. Thank you, Mom, she whispered, for everything. That's what mothers do, I said. We climb down mountains. We make phone calls. We stand beside our daughters when the world tries to push them over the edge. That's what love means. She smiled, and in that smile, I saw the girl she'd been before Brandon, the woman she was becoming after him, and the mother she already was to Hope. We went inside, to warmth, to safety, to home. Behind us, the mountains stood silent in the gathering darkness, holding their secrets. But we were no longer among them. We were free. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps me continue sharing stories that uncover the hidden truths of everyday life. There are so many more untold stories waiting to be revealed. Thank you for being here. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in their place? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please share them with me in the comments below. On the screen, you can see 2 more life stories I strongly recommend. There are many more waiting on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story.